The coronavirus pandemic has led to a crisis on many fronts, from healthcare to the economy and criminal justice. These are among the areas that figure in a call for action recently by the Black Caucus of Young Democrats of Massachusetts. And we're joined by the YDMA's new president, Lezlie Braxton Campbell. Thank you very much for being with us, and congratulations, Lezlie.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
I want to introduce you to our viewers and maybe start with your own pathway into political engagement. How did that all get started for you?
Yes, so I have been involved in politics since I was a kid. My mom used to volunteer on campaigns, and so she'd take me out there with her. Actually, I remember like the first campaign I ever did a standout on. I was on the bus coming home. I was in second grade, and I saw my mother like down the street. And I'm like, oh, there's my mom. And, I got off the bus and she's like, come here, you're going to come with me. You're going to stand out. You're going to hold up a sign. And this is who we're supporting. I started learning from there. And in high school, I started off with environmental activism and just like learning about pesticides and teaching other people about that. And also the effects on having highways going through cities, especially in predominantly communities of color. And that's where I started learning how activism and politics intertwine. Going into college, though, I went to college for something completely different at first and kind of came back to that in my junior and senior year and doing organizing around conflict resolution and nonviolence trainings for youth, and really started like lobbying on behalf of like higher education, things like that. And actually, I went to go lobby my state rep, and at the end of it, he actually offered me an internship. And so that's why I kind of like got involved like with the legislative game a little bit. And even though right after college, I went into the field, I studied and did that. And about 2 years in, I was like, okay, this is not a good fit for me. And, just doing the community programs outside of work wasn't enough. And, I was doing work at the company I worked for, and I started actually their Black affinity group, and just trying to find ways like to bring my outside inside. It was like, no, I really want to be in the community, and I really want to do like more legislative work, really want to advocate like for folks like to really get involved in the civic process. And so when I moved back home to Massachusetts, I was gone for 2 years after college. I looked up the Young Democrats and got involved. I revived the Western Mass chapter because I live in Springfield, and then ended up just getting involved with our statewide board. I got involved with Young Democrats of America. I'm actually the secretary of the legislation committee for Young Democrats of America. And then...
You've also been a middle school teacher, right?
Yes, I'm also a middle school teacher.
Has that shaped you politically in some way?
It has. And so when I first started teaching, I was teaching a social justice elective and social studies. And, when you when you get to talk to the kids and you see like how much they care about what's going on, like in the community and like and outside in the world, like, it makes you realize it's really important for them to have a grasp and understanding on like the real thing that's going on. Like sometimes the textbooks aren't enough, but like really being able to bring what's going on outside in the classroom. And I love that I'm able to do that with all that I'm involved in.
When you look at those young people that you teach, they're getting interested in things that when I was a kid growing up, people might have regarded as a distraction. But when these kids look at that information that you're leading them to, does that inspire them? Does that maybe give them more drive to do well?
It does. There was a protest in my city last week. It was a march organized by a couple of former high school students. And I saw within the past 2 years, I've taught 600 kids, like 400 at my school and 200 at my previous school. And out of that, I saw about 150 of them out there. And, it was getting later. I'm like, I should go home. Like, no, we're doing what you taught us how to do. And we're doing, like what we learned like in class. And we're seeing how it's all coming together. And that's just so inspiring because it lets me know that I'm doing something right. At the end of the day, sometimes I feel like that I get through to you. And when you get to see it in action, it keeps you going.
Lezlie, we're going to fast forward to gatherings of grown-ups in this case. You've been to YDMA conventions. This is for the past 2 years now. You've been to other party gatherings. What is different about this year right now? How did it feel to you?
So, well, one, we are in a pandemic, so that being connected digitally versus in person, that's a whole different feel. But what I've noticed is I'm seeing a lot more folks becoming active. Our statewide conventions usually bring in our largest population like throughout the year. But in the amount of folks like now that the amount of folks now that come and like want to be involved because like, hey, like I can get to you like from my living room or from my kitchen or from my bedroom, as opposed to maybe, driving 20 minutes to this meeting when I just got out of work. But I feel the energy of the young adults really wanting to do something, wanting to make that change. And right now I feel like we really want to capitalize on that and really use that going forward.
Of course, one of the other things that has come into shape here is the statement from the Black Caucus in YDMA, and this is about almost like a common denominator among a lot of different things. What do you see in this?
So I just want to talk about the statement a little bit. And so I got together, I was the former vice chair of the Black Caucus. I got together with the chair and our other vice chair, and I said, hey, I think we should release a statement about what's going on. And we were all on board, and we looped in the public policy director, and we looped in another member of the caucus, and we really just got to it. And we just thought it was really important to let everybody know like where we stand and to also call for specific demands, because we know that police brutality is just one of the issues. We also know that there are other issues around racial equity, especially for the Black community, that we wanted to highlight as well.
And of course, the other thing here is about, I know it was concerned about racial justice with people who are incarcerated, but also essential workers going back to work and maybe not having enough protection.
Yeah. When we look at who our essential workers are, or the folks that have had to be on the front lines, we notice that a lot of them are people of color, whether they be Black or Latino. And so we notice that they're the ones at high risk for exposure. We also know that they are the ones that are contracting coronavirus at much higher rates. And so, like we're calling for this, for the PPE, we're calling for the protection, we're calling to make sure our community stays safe. When you look at it, a lot of people in specific jobs can't work from home. And unfortunately, the people that are in those jobs that can work from home tend to be people of color outside of first responders and our nurses. And I want to thank them for all the work they've been doing. But that's the truth.
Because what I'm also interested in here is with regard to policing, the systemic part. What's the real nub of that as far as curbing the excess and yes, the profiling and the racism?
So we have called, well, we want reform around policing and around police brutality. And so I don't know if you know, one of the 10 points released by the Massachusetts Black and Latino Caucus were to establish a civil review board on a municipal level that has subpoena power and that can actually like hold law enforcement responsible. Because the issue that we're seeing, it's much more complicated than just giving somebody an anti-racism training or undoing racism training. Because you can give them the training and give them the conversation, but if there's no follow through, then what happens there? So like we need to have a review process, and there needs to be consequences when stuff like this happens. But we've been asking for this for many, many decades. It's nothing that's new. The only thing that's different is that now we see it on camera.
We're focused on all the changes that have at least flowed out from the pandemic or been brought to the surface by it. But I remember 2 years ago when Ayanna Pressley was running against Mike Capuano, there were a lot of long-term Democrats saying, well, on policies, there isn't much difference between them. And yet when I saw the gathering of Latino and Black caucus members around that 10-point plan recently, watching them walk up to the State House, certainly it said to me that, it makes a difference who's in Congress. I mean, what did you read into that?
So it's really powerful to see my legislators going to take a stand on something and coming together. And also to, I am very fortunate, even though I don't live in that congressional district, I'm very happy that Ayanna Pressley does represent me in Congress in some way, shape, or form, in terms of being a Massachusetts resident. And even like with her justice guarantee, and wanting to reduce the amount of people that are in prison and looking at how we imprison people, I think that that's very important. And I'm very happy that work is being done. But it's also good to see that the caucus has somebody that they can work with on a federal level. Not to say that there's not other folks they can work with, but they have somebody that identifies within the caucus that they can actually go to and work with. And that I just feel like that relationship might be a little bit different.
Well, thinking as a young Democrat, you've seen all of these protests in the streets recently, mostly peaceful, a lot of young people, a lot of energy. What would you like to do with that?
I one of the protests I was at, I actually stayed around like for hours after it ended because there were folks still there at the police department. And I was kind of just staying there just to kind of have a conversation with folks, just to hear, like, what do they want next? Because there's so many folks that are frustrated because they feel like, okay, like we keep protesting, we keep marching, but then like what happens next? And like what changes? Like we ask for change, we get one little itty bitty policy, but then we're still out here and we're still doing this. Um, and right now, I want everybody to take that energy and I want them to put it like into what they do best, but also like to really be engaged civically. Like we're seeing like a lot of folks like realizing like, okay, we're asking for legislative changes. Who are the people representing us? Like, oh wow, like I didn't know that. I didn't know that they had oversight over that. So now I'm going to pay more attention to that. And so what I said to folks is, like I want folks to keep protesting. Not violently, but just to keep protesting, but also while you're protesting, start going to like these neighborhood board meetings, like start going like to these hearings, start going to these town halls, start holding your legislators accountable, because I feel like that's the only way we're going to see change. You have to go to the ballot box, but you also have to be at the front door as well.